Hello everybody, how are we doing? Welcome to the first episode of our pharmacology series. And so we'll try to introduce some of the most important and basic concepts when we talk about pharmacology. So what is pharmacology? Pharmacology is the study of drugs, their chemical constituents, their biological action, their therapeutic application or use, right? It can also refer to the science of how drugs interact with biological systems. So these are the two, I think, most commonly accepted definitions of pharmacology. So when we talk about pharmacology, we're talking about a drug, we're talking about what that drug does on biological systems, and we're also talking about how are we going to use that drug, its therapeutic applications, right? And then we'll also see later on that we'll also be talking about other parameters involved with in drug administration, such as the contraindications also, right? Then there's another discipline of pharmacology called toxicology. So in toxicology, it's a discipline or a branch of pharmacology that studies the adverse effects of drugs in living systems. Very important concept to take note of. So generally, toxicology should come after pharmacology, but I think in the next couple of episodes, we'll mostly do pharmacology. So what is a drug? So this is a very important concept. You need to get this one straight. So when we say a drug, there are many definitions of a drug. So the most common definitions, I think, are these three here. So there's the first one from the FDA. The FDA, which stands for Food and Drug, it should be administration. It should be administration there, not association. So the Food and Drug Administration. So the FDA defines a drug as being a substance that is intended for diagnosis, cure, mitigation, treatment, or prevention of disease. That's a very good definition of a drug. And then the World Health Organization defines a drug as being a pharmaceutical product that is designed to explore and modify physiological systems and pathological states. This one is a very, very good definition. However, these definitions, even though they are good, it's also beneficial to think of a drug in this way. So you could think of a drug, conceptually speaking, as being a substance other than food that when taken in can change the physiology of a biological system. So what does this mean? We mean a drug is anything. It's literally anything apart from food, that when you take it into your body, which is a biological system, your physiology changes, right? So we're calling such a substance a drug, right? What about a medicine? So it's also important for you to be able to distinguish the difference between a drug and a medicine. So a medicine is a drug. However, a medicine has therapeutic use. So whenever you have a substance that changes your physiology, that substance is a drug. But if that substance that changes your physiology is used therapeutically, or meaning if it has, if you are using it for therapeutic reasons, then we'll call that drug a medicine. So we're saying all medicines are drugs, right? But that does not necessarily mean that all drugs can be medicines. Then there's also the concept dosage form. So for a dosage form, it refers to a pharmaceutical preparation that has an accurate dose for administration to a patient. So a dosage form should be used therapeutically. It's a medicine, true. However, a dosage form is a medicine that has an accurate dose for administration. That's the major difference. So what are we saying here? A dosage form is a medicine, and a medicine is a drug. But not all drugs can be dosage forms, and not all drugs can be medicines, right? And not all medicines can be dosage forms. A good example is aloe vera. So when you look at aloe vera, or commonly we say tembusha, right? So when you look at tembusha, you're able to say that tembusha has many therapeutic benefits in biological systems. Some say that it also helps with stomach pains, and it has so many other therapeutic benefits. However, one thing you'll be able to see is that generally, whenever you're using Tambusha, whether you're using it topically to dry a wound or whatever, there is usually no specific dose. So in that particular case, the aloe vera or the Tambusha is playing the role of being a medicine, right? And it is not a dosage form because there's no accurate dose for administration to the patient. So that's an important concept to take note of. So let's move to the next concept. So the next concept, we'll be talking about indications for drugs, meaning why do we use drugs? So we use drugs for these 4 reasons. So if you ever forget the 4 reasons, just think of this mnemonic: can't really draw properly. So the C is for cure disease. We use drugs to cure disease. There's so many drugs that we can use to cure disease. Then the R is for relieve symptoms. The D is for diagnosis. The P is for prevention. So for example, when we talk about the idea of, let's say, curing disease, there are so many drugs we can think about under this category. Let me give an example of, let's say, penicillins, right? So an individual might have, let's say, some form of bacterial infection, right? And then this bacterial infection could manifest in the form of some disease, right? Doesn't really matter what the disease is. Whenever you give antibiotics, the antibiotics can kill the causative agent, which is the bacteria, and therefore cure the disease. Second one, which is relieve symptoms. There are certain drugs that do not necessarily act to cure the disease. However, they just treat the symptoms. Let me give you an example. In individuals that have a condition called hyperthyroidism, it's whenever you have too much T3 and T4 in circulation. What happens is that there's a symptom you get with hyperthyroidism called exophthalmos. So what exophthalmos means is that the individual's eyes look shocked, like they look, I don't know how I can illustrate this, they look quite open and so in such a case, what we use is we use certain eye drops. I think they're called guanethidine eye drops, in order to treat the symptoms. We're not really treating the disease, but we're just treating the symptoms. Diagnosis. So for diagnosis, there are so many drugs used in this category. One is edrophonium, for example. So for edrophonium, it can be used in the diagnosis of myasthenia gravis. I think we'll talk about that when we talk about cholinergic drugs later on. And then prevention, this is where our vaccines will fall in. And also there are many other drugs that can reduce the chances of having a particular disease. So when we talk about prevention, we have 2 types of primary prevention, and then we also have secondary prevention. So primary prevention is prevention of the actual disease. They are preventing the actual disease from occurring. An example is a vaccine, right? Vaccination. But then secondary prevention does not really prevent the disease. However, it prevents the progression of that disease, meaning you still have the disease, but it's preventing the disease from becoming worse, or it's reducing some of the risk factors that can contribute to worsening the disease, right? Or that can contribute to the disease. An example, we have tamoxifen. So when we talk about tamoxifen is an anti-cancer drug. It's an anti-cancer drug. So we use this drug as a way of prophylaxis. So when we say prophylaxis, we mean a way of preventing or reducing the risk of having breast cancer. And then statins. Whenever we administer statins, what do? They lower the cholesterol levels. And then when you lower the cholesterol levels, what are you ultimately achieving? You're reducing the risk of having cardiac problems, or let me say cardiovascular diseases such as atherosclerotic plaques, such as having thrombotic plaques and whatsoever. So preventing or let me say, are reducing the chances of having cardiovascular diseases. Let me just summarize like that.